So I've started. First of all, thank you very much for being here with me. So I know it's one of the last sessions of the conference. I know you're tired. I will try to make this as in action as possible, so that I keep you here with me, and I know you will not regret coming to this session. This is the result of the poll for whom replied. A few of you seem to have already upgraded to Spring Boot 3, which is good. It means you will already know some of the things that I'll present, but less have actually implemented their own authorization server. So that's good, because that's something we'll also do today from scratch. And yeah, I hope that will be something you like. Today we discuss about the new things in Spring Security, what you need to know when you will upgrade, and also how to implement, well, just a minimal version of the new authorization server Spring Security team has implemented, which is awesome. It's an awesome product, and you need at least to know about it and then research it later. And oh, that's an error there, sorry for that. With a Spring Boot 3.1 recipe. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and this is me. You will find me online. Most people know me for writing 3 books and for my YouTube channel. But you can follow me also on Twitter and LinkedIn, and we can stay in touch later, so you can discuss more and you can see me delivering more content. So in case you haven't already followed me, you can do that, and let's stay in touch. And just for you to know, I've asked ChatGPT about what I will tell you today before the presentation, and it didn't know, so Spring Security. Not a lot, at least. Cool. So there are a few changes that you will observe if you upgrade your application. And what we'll do today, I will show you some slides with them. We'll make some comparison, and then we will actually do an upgrade of a very small project together. And once we finish with that, we'll also try to implement a minimal authorization server as well, which is something new. The first version of the authorization server has been released somewhere in November last year, so it's quite recent. And hopefully afterwards that will make you more interested in the subject, and you will research more about it yourself as well. So with that being said, let's go through the major versions, through the major changes, and then we'll do the upgrade hands-on. If you have ever seen the Web Security Configure Adapter class, who has ever seen the Web Security Configure? You will not see it anymore from now. And of course, due to the fact that extending Web Security Configure Adapter will not be there, then overriding the configure method and the configure methods, because there are 3 of them, will also disappear, being replaced by a bean. Actually, the Web Security Configure Adapter class is no longer there at all. It was a short time just marked as deprecated for removal. Now it's completely removed, and you have to replace your configuration using a security filter chain bean, which is a plugin in the Spring context, which actually makes things a lot better because it's much easier to configure. It's much easier to decouple the configuration, and of course it's much easier to test the configuration. And whoever tried to make more complex configurations with Spring Security in the past might have run into circular dependency issues, and of course with having beans instead of extending stuff, it's a lot more easier to get rid of those as well. So that's one of the points. Of course, the things have been done in such a way in which it's a lot easy to convert your code from the older to the newer version. So it keeps the HTTP security object, which is somewhere, if you use Spring Boot, somewhere in the Spring context already, so you can use it as a parameter. It will be automatically injected, and the build method of this object just returns the security filter chain, which is then the thing you actually plug into the Spring context. Then you will no longer see the authorized requests method. It's been replaced with the authorized HTTP requests, and besides that, end matchers, MVC matchers, regex matchers. Well, it was quite difficult, at least in the past, to know what and when to use, and to be honest, a lot of developers simply copy-paste it from Stack Overflow. Now they had the opportunity with ChatGPT, of course, but it won't happen anymore because it's now a matter of only using request matchers, which is a lot easier, a lot simplified. There are some changes also in the access method. Access method in the past only received a spell expression as a parameter, and whoever has seen a spell expression of 3 to 5 rows, some of them I did. You don't want to see that. It's a lot difficult to read and especially to debug, and this is basically about troubleshooting Java, so trust me. If you have it programmatically using an object like an implementation of the authorization manager interface, which is now the object the access method receives as a parameter, it's creating a much easier way to, a much cleaner way to implement your authorization rules using the access method. Of course, all implementations for interpreting a spell expression have been provided by Spring Security, and Web Expression Authorization Manager is basically an implementation of the Authorization Manager interface that allows you to still give a spell expression, and this way, of course, you will not be impacted too dramatically by the upgrade. So you will be able to smoothly upgrade and then change to a programmatic approach if you want, instead of a spell one. Or you can keep the spell one if you really like to debug Spring expressions of a lot of rows. So other changes, very small one. So enable global method security. We were always having to put that pre-post enable to flag, which is, well, since at least in the past, I think 10 years, I've never seen anyone using the secured or roles allowed annotations. Have you ever used the secured and roles allowed annotations with Spring applications in the past 10 years? 1, 2 people in the room, okay. You now have the opportunity to replace them with pre-post authorized annotations, and the idea is that the enable method security comes with that flag by default on true, so it doesn't exclude the usage of secured and roles allowed, just that you don't have to use the flag because it will be defaulted to true, because that's in general the way we use pre-post method security annotations. But again, I don't really like to use slides. I prefer to write code because I'm a developer. So I prepared a very small example for you, and the purpose is, first of all, upgrade it to Spring Boot 3. And then why not upgrade even further to Spring Boot 3.1 and see if we have anything else that we have to upgrade further, because suppose you've attended Spring I/O, you might have seen yesterday and found out that Spring Boot 3.1 has been released. So why not? We can try it, and you will see that there are actually changes that you have to do, some deprecations there. Cool. There I have this project, and hopefully everyone sees even behind that is now on 2.6 for some reason. Do you guys behind there, do you see the code well? Okay, fine. So let's try first. I think the last version yesterday was 3.06 before the yesterday's new releases. So let me actually try to put this and see what happens. Do I smoothly upgrade? Not really, because first of all, when you do upgrades, it might happen that you have to change some dependencies as well. So in this case, it really happens that between Spring Boot 2.6 and 3.06, probably a dependency, the MySQL one has changed. Indeed, it's changed its place in the Maven central, and now I think it looks a bit like this. But after we do that, if we update again, we will get into the code. So let's see. First thing, probably crashing, which is also unrelated to Spring Security, should be related actually to JPA, because now the space used is Jakarta IE instead of Java IE, and you might already know that. So the first thing I need to change is actually a couple of imports here. And then I'm going into my project configuration. Well, oh, it looks like a hell, isn't it? So we don't want to see web security configure adapter anymore. Clear. And if you don't want to see the web security configure adapter, then of course you don't have an extend, you can have an overriding, so this annotation disappears. But we know that we will have to change it into a bin, so let's actually directly change it into a bin. And if I do that, I know that the method should return something. So I will make it return a security filter chain object, and the method name is not that important, of course, but why not? Let's give it a name that describes better the object that we put in the context. I don't need to change the parameter because now that HTTP security object will be injected automatically. So I need only to go further and try to see authorized requests. It is now an authorized HTTP request, and I don't have MVC matchers, I don't have ANT matchers. Now I only have request matchers. The access method changes also. It doesn't receive anymore a string as a parameter. If I want to smoothly upgrade and still keep the spell expression, then I need to change it to an authorization manager implementation. But fortunately, we are provided with the web expression authorization manager implementation, which still knows how to interpret the spell. And if further you want, you can change with a custom, for example, implementation of the authorization manager interface. But counting that we only want to upgrade smoothly now, let's just put it in place so that it compiles again. It's not ignoring AND matchers, it's ignoring request matchers. So a few of the things changed in this direction in the naming point. And I think it should compile. The only thing I need to still do to make sure my code compiles is, of course, create the the security filter chain object and return it. I still have a deprecation. We don't use enable global method security. By the way, this anyway didn't work, did it? Because I should have had the pre-post enabled on true, because that's not by default with the enable global method security. But we still don't need this parenthesis in case we upgrade, because enable method security should now be enough. Now if we go here, you can see that the pre-post enable is defaulted to true. So is something else failing? I guess everything now it's in place, and that's it for our upgrade to 3.0.6, which wasn't that difficult. Now you don't even need to know all of this by heart and do it by heart, because if you have a few hundreds microservices, well, I don't think that all of them will have security implementation, but let's say that we have more applications. You can use some tools that you find online to upgrade, but I still do consider that all the developers should know what those tools do. So that's basically what they do generally. However, let's try now to push it a bit. And since we are in the 19th of May, and that means yesterday was the 18th, it means that we now have 3.1.0 released. So let's see if we really have it. So I'm just trying to get the dependency, and it works. And then I will go back to the project config. Oh my God, again deprecations. That's because starting with this new version, you will have to use customizers with all the DSL methods. So HTTP basic without a parameter that you would have used with the approach of adding the configuration later, as we do on our example here, doesn't work anymore. It's actually not only deprecated, but deprecated for removal. So very soon you will not have at all this method. So make sure you do upgrade as quick as possible. Up to this point where we had these two possibilities of configuration, I always recommended only staying consistent. So I didn't at least care if you use one or the other approach, but I always said stay consistent. Some of the guys from here, you have been at my workshop on Wednesday, and I think I said that even in the, have you been? Any? We have people? A few of them. Okay, so as I told you that up to now, it was only use it as you'd like, but just be consistent. Now you will only have one option, so it's easier to be consistent. So instead, we have to give the customizer parameter. If you don't want, if you really only want the defaults, so you can only say customizer with defaults, like in this case. But in the case of HTTP requests here, where I have created a few configurations, I can move them the way they are, but use the lambda expression approach, which will look like this in the end. So this is the first of it, and then I have to do the same thing for the CSRF. Okay, and then I have to do the same thing for my curse configuration. So the lambda expression is basically the customizer. Okay. Okay. But I think we made it work now with 3.1. So I guess that's most that we need to do for Spring Security. But Spring Security and these things that you have seen are not the only things that have changed. So starting with November last year, we have a fresh 1.0 version of the authorization server, and you might have heard about it, but my poll says that not all of you have used it. So some of you might have tried it. Did you try it at least? If not, we will try it together. So an authorization server was possible to implement years ago using the Spring Security OAuth dependency, but first of all, it wasn't that easy as is now, and secondly, it wasn't implementing properly OAuth 2 and OpenID Connect. And with what you have now, you will be able to only in a few minutes spin up the minimum authorization server, which is something I can demonstrate today, because we have a few minutes and I have the time to implement it together with you. So let's do that. So in case, oh, by the way, in case you want to do that, you just have to add one dependency. And that's what I was doing till yesterday. And then I was staying on Twitter, and I've seen that 1.1.0 has been released, which is yes. But does it change too much? I said, maybe. And then I saw another tweet, and I realized that together with it, it also comes with the possibility to have it as a Spring Boot starter, which is a lot. So now, if you are using 3.1.0, you can actually directly use the Spring Boot starter, which is what we will also do today because we want to use the latest version. Unfortunately, it's not yet there in Start Spring IO as a dependency, but it will be soon, small steps at a time. But that's how projects evolve. It's slower, but secure. Okay, let's try it. Let's do it. Let's do it. It's new project, whatever. I already have a demo. Oh. And I will add the web dependency, but actually I will then just manually put the dependency in POM XML, because again, I can't still add it from the starter IO. That will soon be there. So say Spring Framework boot, and then it's Spring Boot starter OAuth 2 authorization server, and let's see if it's working. So I'm on the central repo. I don't have any special repo for I don't know, early releases or something, okay? And it seems it really worked. So even if it's not there in Start Spring IO, you can add it and it works. And we have a few things to configure, and we can do that now. So a project config class should be enough. And if it's a configuration class, I will of course add the configuration annotation. And then a few security filters, because we are using the latest version of Spring Security. So security filter chain. Let's call this one authorization servers filter chain. Add it as a bin in the context, and then using the HTTP security parameter, we can provide some default configuration using the apply default security utility method. I will simply propagate the exceptions and return the object I built. Now, of course, I applied some default security, but I still want to customize it. So how do we customize it? You can get a configurer of the type you'd like. In our case, we'd like specifically the OAuth authorization server configurer, and then you can apply specific configurations. For example, you can actually, why not, enable the OpenID Connect protocol. Now, it really depends on whether I'd like to use a grant type that allows a user to log in or not. But if I would like to use that, like the authorization code grant type, for example, then I need to have also a way for the user to log in, because the authorization code grant type implies that the user has to log in, and then the authorization server has to redirect the user back to the client. So in that case, I also need to say somehow that if you didn't go through the authorization request with the parameters, you should be redirected to login. And exception handling here with the customizer, of course, like all the others now in 3.1. Default authentication entry point 4, and we just say we have the login authentication entry point at the, in case you don't want to customize it, and I don't want now to customize it, it's the login. I think this one also received something like media type request matcher to specify the media type, which would be HTML. But now I also need to specify the configuration to this app as a web app. So for that, I'm going to add another security filter chain, which I will call app security filter chain. And normally, since I have two, and they are both bins in the context, I need to add the order annotation. Still the HTTP security object. And we enable the form login for the user to log in, and we can say that all the endpoints should be authenticated. Of course, more customizations can be done, but we are just working on a minimal project here. Minimal or not, there is no authorization server without clients. You might have authorization server without users, because, for example, you only use the client credentials grant type, which doesn't imply the existence of a user. But you can't have it the other way around, like users and no clients. The clients are the applications. Makes no sense not to have them. So let's have them. The authorization server needs to know who are its clients. They have to be registered, and they have to have also a minimum of configuration. So the register client repository is an interface that allows you to easily implement the management of the client's details. It's very similar to what you have in Spring Security as user details service. You just implement this contract, you give it an implementation, and you tell where are the details coming from. We will use an in-memory implementation here, but normally in your application, you will probably connect to a database or take it from an endpoint, take it from an AD, I don't know, you take it from somewhere. So let me just add one register client for our purpose here. What is the minimum thing we need if we want to use it with also the authorization code grant type and the client credentials, maybe have some refresh token? Well, you will have an internal ID, but then you at least need the client credentials. Again, they will not be hard-coded, yes, in a real-world project. All of this will come from at least a database, okay? And they will not be in clear like the secret. Now I will use the no password encoder like I do in most of my examples, but normally you should use like a strong hashing function such as bcrypt, okay? And if you do that in production, don't tell that you've heard it here from me, okay? The grant types. So now we mostly use, and for the moment you can use at least the client credentials, the authorization code, and if you'd like to also use refresh token with the authorization code, which is quite often, you will have to add a refresh token as well. You need to specify how your client authenticates. Well, you can choose it not to authenticate at all, but let's at least use HTTP basic, and you can use JVD as well if you'd like, but I will keep this example simple. If I want, I need at least a scope. No, now I can have any scope, but you can just take one of the enumerated OpenID Connect standard scopes. And if I want the authorization code, then definitely I need at least one redirect URI. Which is in my case something that doesn't exist, but we don't care. Do I miss anything here? Most likely not. But just as an idea, if you would like also to specify some token settings, like for example, if you'd like to give your token a specific time to live, or your refresh token a specific time to live, then you can do it this way. So say I want to create tokens that live for 1 hour. I think the default is about 300 seconds or something like that. And now, of course, it depends which is the kind of token you'd like. So remember, we have opaque and non-opaque tokens. By default, the non-opaque, the JVD tokens are enabled. But you can, and we can start if you want with an opaque one. Say token format, and then you choose reference, and then you will have opaque tokens. Now, if I would use only the client credentials grant type and I have no user, then I think the only thing I still need to add would be an authorization server settings bin that allows you to configure several endpoints. But you can also have a minimal configuration and just return it the way it's defaulted. But I don't want to use the client credentials. I want to use the authorization code grant type, which implies I also need users. I need a resource server at the end of the backend with it. This one only gives you a token. If you don't have a backend to use the token, then of course it makes no sense. I agree with you. But we will not get into the resource server because it's nothing new I can tell you about that one here in this presentation, okay? So we will just end with getting the token. But yes, we need users. So you are right, we need users. So we need users, we need user management. So I need to provide the user details service. And of course I still need to provide, where was I? So I still need to provide a password encoder. I said I will provide a password encoder. I said that I will provide the no password encoder, and I didn't do that. So let's do it, because that's not only important for the user but also important for the client. So I did the bean, and then the last bean, the user details service. So I will return an in-memory user details, but again, usually you will take them from an implementation from a database. If you are curious deeply to how to do that, you can find a lot of videos with me doing that on my YouTube channel, by the way. Yeah. But now let's go with at least one authority. It's what is required. Build. And I'm adding it here. Look, I made a mistake. Here I should have added my client as well. Oh, bean annotation is missing. Okay, cool. I might have skipped something. We will see if it's not working. We will find out together why. But normally this is enough. Since I'm using opaque tokens, I need no keys to sign or validate tokens because they are opaque. I need introspection, but that's out of the box provided. The application started, and now theoretically I can use it. So if I'm going in Postman, I can first of all prove, not that much, that the well-known OpenID configuration is working, which should be because we enabled it. We see all the endpoints that we need here, including somewhere should have also the introspection. We will need the introspection if we would have to implement this with opaque tokens the way I did. And then, well, I prepared in advance the link for the authorization to test, because otherwise it would have taken too much time to put it in place. But I will use, yeah, it's the default that you have just seen. And since I'm using the authorization code, I'm using it with the response type code. My client, I named it client. I use the OpenID scope, as you have seen. And then hopefully this is the same address that I have used. And you see also at the end that I provide the code challenge. The reason I need to provide the code challenge is because by default, the authorization code grant type works with PKC, which is proof key for code exchange, which means that I need to, at the moment or before sending the authorize, when I say I mean the client, creates a random value and then creates a hash over the random value. In this case, the hash S256 means SHA-256. That's the hash function I use. It sends the hash with the authorize, and then it proves that's the same client using the raw random value afterwards. This way, it's sure that the same client who redirected the user to authenticate is the one requiring for the access token. You can disable that if you want. I mean, it's pretty easy to disable it actually by using some client settings here. Like on the client, you say client settings and say client settings, proof key false. But don't do that, okay? Don't do that. So if I'm taking this now and putting it into a browser and log in with, what was my user? Bill 1, 2, 3, 4. Look who's attentive. Very good. So it's Bill and a very secure password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm redirected to that URI, of course, not found because the organizers didn't implement for me that page on their website. But it provides me with the code. And with the code, then I can go and simulate what the client would do, which is calling the token endpoint. So I'm adding the authorization code here. Hopefully I paste it correctly. Remember that this is only usable once by default. Even if it fails, even if this request fails, my authorization code will not be usable again. I need to create another one, which is okay, it's fine, it's safe. And then I get it. And this is not a JVT. Yeah. Why? Because we enabled opaque tokens. But if you really want to test it, you can just go here and use introspection, provide your token, and you will get all the details. That's basically what your resource server would do, because otherwise it doesn't know where to get the details from. Okay, that's an opaque token. But of course, you can also implement JVT, which is most likely what you do. And in that case, this has to go out, or at least this has to go out, sorry. At least this has to go out. And that's not enough. You need to have at least one pair of public-private keys, because you need a way to sign the token, and then the resource server needs the way to validate it, no? And if you want to do that, you need a key source, which is another bean managing the keys, which in the end you will end up with something like a collection of all the keys. Okay, so here you have the key. Let's say it's an RSA key. And we can use this adapter, which is an implementation of the key source over the collection itself. And normally, you would get those keys, and you can have more than one, and you would have more than one. But you would get them from somewhere, from a vault, you would read them from somewhere. I now don't have the opportunity to read them from somewhere, so just for the sake of our example, we can generate them when the bean is created. Normally, that's something that, of course, you'll not do, because that would mean every time you restart the application, you'll have another key there. Not really practical, isn't it? But we can just say, for demo purposes, no? Demo purposes, here it is. So how can I do that? I can do that with a key pair generator, I think. There are a few ways in which you can do that. The easiest is using the Java security APIs, which is not really a set of APIs I enjoy using usually, but I must. So I just create a key pair. I generate a key pair. And then I should somehow get the RSA public and private key. I don't have a really good way to do that, because I don't have any way to provide a generic type here, but I know they are RSA, so I will be able to cast them successfully, since I know that, that what I used here as an algorithm is RSA. I know it looks ugly, that's why I don't like Java security in general.
I think you cast it wrong.
Still private there, the type.
The second cast.
Yeah.
RSA pub.
And the first.
Very good, very good. 10 points for Gryffindor.
Definition guidance.
And here as well. Yeah, copy-paste programming, that's actually a demo of what you should never do, okay? So that's why you should never copy-paste programming. Bad practice. Of course, no one does that.
For demo purpose.
But for demo purposes, yeah. So I need a key ID as well. And let's build it. And that's so difficult. Now, if I restart and follow the same, and that's the last thing I'm doing, and then I will take the questions, I should be able to see that it generates a JVT token. So it started again, and let's just follow the same approach. Going here, was it Bill? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Get the authorization code. We put it in our token endpoint request. We send, and it's a larger token we see here. And we can easily prove that it contains what we expected. So it has been signed with the key ID blah blah blah, which is an important information for the resource server, because that's how the resource server knows what key they will use to verify. Remember, we have only one key, but we could have many. How does the resource server know? Well, it has its own endpoint. You can find it somewhere here. It's called the key endpoint, the key set endpoint. If you send this, this is the public key for the key ID blah blah. In this case, it's basically the key set of only one key, because that's what we created. But you see that the token is non-opaque. No, JVT is a non-opaque token. It contains information. Of course, you might still have cases where you use introspection with non-opaque tokens. For example, if you want to use revocation, which is something that you could do. I will not go into this detail since I don't have too much time still, but I could use token revocation, case in which I need to verify even for a non-opaque token that's been or not revocated, because otherwise I don't know if it's still valid or not. But I think it proves at least that in less than 1 hour, I would say even half of an hour, we managed to create a minimum implementation of an authorization server. So I think it proves that it's really, really simply created, smart created, and I hope that at least this will inspire you to go further and try to write your own and implement your own. And of course, since you didn't ask too many questions during my session, I still leave you at the end. Yeah, here is the first question.
Can you generate a consent prompt?
Can I generate a consent prompt? Yes, I think it's default disabled in some conditions related to OpenID Connect. To be honest with you, I don't know them by heart. I know it's done by specification, and I've seen a lot of issues in the past years in the backlog being solved related to that. So yes. Any other question? See, there are questions.
To use the duration of the token, we had different. It's not working.
So just I will repeat the question. So as we try to set the duration of the token, what?
It depends on the browser how long it is really working. That duration inclusion. In some browsers, after 10 minutes, it's gone.
No, not really.
Others, it works with the 1 hour with the.
No, not
So
not really.
how does it?
So the question is, how does the duration of the token really work? Is it? So when you said that the duration of time, the time to live duration of the access token, it means that the resource server, which is your backend, will consider that token to be valid during that time. If you will take a look in our JVT, you will see that the expiration time here is actually part of the token itself, and you can't change it, because if you would, or someone would in between like intercept the token and change it, then the signature will not be working anymore. So it's not depending on the browser at all. It's first of all, you might not even have a browser. It might be a mobile application, but that's another story. So the client itself will send the token. The resource server, which is the backend, will either reject it or accept it. If it's expired, then a new token can be recreated. The token can be recreated either by redirecting the user back to login again, which is something we usually avoid, and we avoid that if we have a user through the refresh token. So we have the client sending a refresh token. It uses a different, basically, flow and gets a new access token. But it's not dependent on the browser.
The experience we had is a wrong configuration. Because we tried with the same browser several times, it worked, and with another.
I definitely can't tell you what the problem is in your system, because I've never seen that system, and I don't have a crystal globe yet. I would like to have that. But that's how it should work. So what I'm telling you, and so it's very unlikely that it's something related to a token. Maybe a bad implementation of the client side, it's like your Angular or Vue or React application, whatever you use. But yeah, that could be it. But let's, if you want to discuss it afterwards as well.
So the next question is, by the way, thanks for the presentation, great stuff. Can you give a real-world use case for opaque and tokens and JOTs, just to distinguish them a bit? Because I never used opaque tokens, I'm a bit curious what they're about.
If you have information that is, first of all, in a non-opaque token, you see the information, okay, inside. So there is basically one case which I would see where it's rare. That's why we don't really see opaque tokens too often. But if you have too much information to exchange, it's never a good idea to create a very large JVT token. So in that case, you would still need to introspect some information. So if you are in a situation where you would end up with a too large non-opaque token, you might want to think about using an opaque one. Otherwise, that again, in most of the cases, maybe almost all of them, I would say, and you know that, you've seen that, we use JVT tokens. No?
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yes?
Yeah. I'm using custom grant types that we had to build. Can we?
You can implement custom grant types, yes.
In this version?
In this version, yes. It's not something that I could show now again. I think I've seen some videos. I think there was actually one even in the Spring I videos in November, or in January was the recording. You can try finding those. And I think Joe implemented there the device grant type, if I correctly remember, but I hope I'm not wrong, yeah. But
Thank you.
okay, another question.
Question to the first example with the OPEC token. You requested a token set with an OpenID scope, and you got back an ID token. That's always a JOT. I guess also an signed JOT. Which key set is used to sign that token? So
we didn't even have a key set. No, we added a key set afterwards.
Yeah.
So
in the second place. So in the first place, we haven't a key set. So we used an access token. That's an OPEC token. That's fine. But you also got back a refresh token and an ID token, and the ID token was also in JOT, a signed JOT, I guess. And
was it actually? I didn't check that.
In the Postman, I've seen.
I have to check that. I don't know how to answer your question.
I guess,
sorry.
Okay. No worries.
What's the auto configuration, I guess?
Probably, but I don't want to answer on something I'm not sure. Yeah. It's always easy to see it's some default configuration. Cool. Any other question, guys? Then would you allow me to at least randomize for this book? And then the rest of the 9 prizes I have for you, I will take them later, and you will believe me that I took them. Okay. So we can see that a lot of people, 61, so it's from 3, because second is me. So 3 to 61. Okay, so it's 3 to 61. So let's say, ooh, come on, everyone. No. Drum rolls. Number 28. Who is number 28? 28, Dominique. Are you here? Yes. Yeah, so you won the book. Congrats. And guys, thank you again for attending. I know it's one of the last sessions and you were tired. Thanks, and I hope you really enjoyed Spring I.O. I hope to see you at next editions of the same conference, but also at other conferences. And if you have other questions, you can find me outside for the next couple of hours, and then online on social media. Thank you very much. And guys, don't forget also that you can leave me some hearts if you like the application in the app. Yeah, give me a like in the app and leave me the feedback. See you later and on social media. Cheers.